Welcome to our broadcast. Tonight we'll have an hour-long conversation with best-selling author Michael Crichton. Depending on who you talk to, he is either a Renaissance man or, in terms of some, simply a commercial success. Few would disagree that he is one of the most prescient authors in America today. Michael Crichton is a trained physician, a film director, he's a cook, an art collector, a computer hack, and of course one of the most commercially successful novelists of our time. The author of Jurassic Park, Andromeda Strain, Rising Sun, and others have more than 100 million books in print. In his latest novel, Disclosure, he turned sexual harassment on its head, making the harasser a woman. The publisher has already printed 950,000 copies. I'm pleased to have him. Welcome.
Thank you, Charles.
It's great to have you here. I can also say this, that Sunday week, this is Friday, Sunday week it will be #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and it will knock Robert Waller, who's been on there forever, it seems like, as the #1 fiction in America. And probably for the first time, I assume, will give you a bestseller that sells more than 1 million copies in hardback, right?
Yes, that might happen.
So what do you think of all that?
Pretty amazing.
I mean, all that work, all that energy, is this, what does it mean to you?
Well, it's gratifying in one sense, and in another sense, I think that the doing the work is where my primary interest is, and I've always been very aware, and I think it's necessary to feel this way, that you write the book, you do it as well as you can, and it comes out. And what happens to it, if it sells 1 million copies or if it sells 10,000 copies, that's not to do with you.
I understand, but it says something that you have touched a nerve, that this is good writing, that people want to read your story. That's basically what it says, right?
I hope that's true. I don't know. I'm not sure what it says.
All right. Well, it says that. Somebody wants to read what you're writing. I mean, it's not about hype. It's about a book that people are reading. What do you think the nerve is you've touched? Why this book?
I think there's two answers. One answer is that in the last few books, the audience has been increasing, and I think
that's right.
That you do start to have an audience.
Crichton is a name brand.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Or somebody that people, they like the last book, so they'll read the next one. I found it interesting. That's part of it. I think the other thing is that there's a tremendous interest in the society on the relations between the sexes, and harassment as an issue is a sort of distillation of that.
Yeah. How did you come to write this story first? Just the notion of a plot dealing with a question of sexual politics, a question of sexual harassment, a question of the relationship between men and women.
Somebody told me a story.
What story?
A story about a man who was harassed by a woman who was his former lover.
And she was a superior in a company.
She'd gotten the job that he wanted.
Right.
They had had a meeting behind closed doors. No one else was there. They both came out and accused the other of improper conduct. This was in 1988, before some of these issues. And it was told to me as an example of the kinds of difficulties that corporations can have in trying to assess how to deal with their employees. And these are two very highly placed, very valuable employees who had had a prior relationship and who are now at each other's throats.
Did a light bulb go off in your head?
Yes, immediately. And it wasn't somebody saying this is a good story for you to write or something. No, there was this talk.
Yeah. Now, what happens to you? Are you out looking for ideas, or are you just out in a sense, and they come to you? In other words, you didn't say, "I got to find another idea for my next novel after Jurassic Park. What's it going to be? Something's happening in the sexual landscape. I'm looking for the right peg."
No. No.
So what? All of a sudden you hear a good story and you say, wow.
Yes, I thought, that's a good story. That's interesting. And what interested me was the reversal of roles, because I thought that made a new opportunity to look at the assumptions that the society makes about who's responsible, who's at fault, who's the aggressor, who's the victim. And I thought that's a very interesting thing. And then it sat there for several years.
Sat in the back of your head.
Right.
You didn't touch it. You didn't do anything. You didn't go do any research. You weren't reading about this stuff. You didn't go out and say, I got to understand feminism. I got to understand what's been happening in this society.
Well, I did it in a sort of informal way, but because it was an interest anyway. And, you know, my way of working is to have an idea like that and then see if it continues to push at me. You know, and at some point I think, well, I guess I have to write this.
At what point is that?
I had finished Rising Sun, and I had decided to start working on this. So, Rising Sun had this odd thing for me. It was finished quite a long time before it was published.
Yeah.
So I was well into the next book when it came out. And then there was this great controversy about Rising Sun. Yeah. And here I am sitting writing about sexual harassment. And I just stopped.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, I don't know if I...
Because you thought you were heading for another controversy, and you'd had it with Rising Sun.
Yes,
and it was distasteful for you.
Yes.
Because they perceived it as Japanese bashing on your part. And racism. Yeah. Yeah, and that was not what you intended.
Not what I intended, and it's a very, very tough criticism.
What's the risk here? Here's the risk here, is that you are saying that, well, you tell me, what do you think the risk is that the controversy might attend this book?
I think, you know, I hesitate to guess. I think that that in any discussion about gender relations, the feelings are so strong that people kind of lift off. I mean, I've watched a lot of discussions on television with people who are discussing these issues in the last 6 or 7 months because I'm trying to see kind of how it goes. And the thing that I think the most striking characteristic is how confused it is, how people will talk about 3 or 4 different ideas at the same moment. You know, they'll talk about legal issues and kind of social relations issues and feelings issues, and they're all mixed together.
Yeah. In fact, you don't believe there has been a real genuine dialogue about the question of harassment in America, do you?
No, I think men have been silent.
Men have been silent?
Yes.
And what is it men should be saying? That we should not be characterized or stereotyped because of our chromosomes?
That's certainly part of it, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, this notion of that we are the testosterone poisoned sex.
Yeah. Always the aggressor
yes.
and never the victim.
Yes. Always on the sexual lookout, always predatory, always violent, always insensitive, always withdrawn. I think is a remarkable stereotype. I mean, you cannot make a similar stereotype about women, although women will make it about themselves. They'll say that they're nurturing and cooperative and so on, and that's part of the current ideology in some feminist groups.
All right, let me draw you out on this. Come on. Here's what...
Let's commit suicide.
No, well, let's do it together here. Here's what you believe. You believe that sexual harassment is about power. It's not about gender. And that the more women that climb into the power chair, the more sexual harassment by women we'll see.
I think so. I believe this, and I believe it in part because, and I should say immediately, they're not good statistics. So to debate this on the level of statistical things is a fool's game. But
most sexual harassment against men is men against men, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. 20%, about 5% is women against men.
Yes. So 80% of male claims are against other men. And the overwhelming majority are women against men. And the reason why I have this feeling is that it is my perception in life and my reading of the literature that there are essentially no differences in behavior between men and women, adult men and women. So I would not expect, as women move into positions of power, that they would behave in substantially different ways from men, which is to suggest, as far as I can tell, that a certain number of people in supervisory positions will abuse in various ways their subordinates.
But women step forward, as you know, to say some say it's not that way because women are different. They are more different than you think they are between the sexes as adults, and it's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen because they are just different about power. Now, how do we prove one point or the other?
Well, I think this will all come clear. Yeah. But certainly, I mean, I'm interested in the kinds of informal things. For example, Working Woman did a survey of women about women bosses. And there was a tremendous dissatisfaction among working women about their their bosses because they had the expectation that they would behave in a way that was more nurturing, that they would be supportive, mentoring women,
right.
That they would have a kind of cooperative thing. And it turned out that they were doing the bottom line and being just as tough and just as aggressive as the man who had previously held the job. And when the women themselves were confronted, they would say, hey, you know, I have a career, I have a corporate position, my job is to make money, get out of my face. And I think the reality of hierarchical structures is that the hierarchy strongly determines the behavior of an individual within the hierarchy. None of us in a hierarchy have a tremendous amount of flexibility, and I think the notion that major changes, I think there certainly may be some changes in tone and attitude, but the notion that major changes will occur because someone of a different sex sits behind the seat, I think is going to prove to be a fantasy.
It hasn't proven itself to be that. I mean, if you were looking for confirmation of your point, I suspect you could look at the exercise of power by women in politics. It has not been noticeably different because of their gender.
No. And everyone agrees that that's the case.
Exactly. You know, and you're saying the same thing will have in terms of sexual relationships.
Absolutely.
Power will control.
Absolutely.
Dominion will control.
Yes.
You quote, and I was looking at Katharine Graham saying, power is neither male nor female.
That's right. She said it. She believes it.
And Henry Kissinger's, it's the ultimate aphrodisiac.
Yeah.
What do you think we will understand more because you flip the characters over? This is Meredith, Man Cruncher. Johnson is the harasser. What will we understand more about the issue because you did that?
I think that we're already starting to have some women in positions of power who are starting to feel and complain about what the harassment threat can mean and how it can sometimes at least be unfairly applied. So there is absolutely, I think, an unacknowledged vulnerability of the superior person, whether male or female. And there is an unacknowledged power of the subordinate or, quote, victim, which is equally unacknowledged. I mean,
unacknowledged power. There's power in the potential to claim,
yes,
I've been harassed.
Absolutely.
Because of the way the society, basically, there's no presumption of innocence.
No, there's a presumption of guilt.
Yeah.
It'll freeze your career. It'll freeze your position in the corporation. It may ruin your career. I mean, by the time the thing gets settled, 30, 60 days down the line, if it goes to litigation at several years, your life may be over.
Do you know men and women who are paranoid about this, who've changed their behavior because?
I know attorneys, which is interesting. The attorneys who handled these cases are the most cautious people I know in the workplace. And a lot of them are what I think many people would consider very extreme or paranoid. You know, they will not take any kind of a business trip with a female colleague, will not get on an airplane with a female, a woman in their firm.
Will not have drinks in a hotel
Absolutely
somewhere out
not.
of town.
Will not. Will not, under any circumstances, will be fired before they do it. So if you want to send me on a trip, send the woman and another woman or another man who is willing to take the risk, or send me with a man. I will not travel with a woman. I will not risk it.
How did you prepare for this? Because there's a lot of thinking now going on about feminism. We did a thing the other day here on this broadcast the other night about gender. And it was billed as sort of the gender wars, but it became much more an examination of the changing attitude towards women's sexuality by feminists. Naomi Wolf was here, and some other people here. Tell me what you found about feminism when you began to read and sort of to rummage around in these ideas. I'll give you one example. I suspect you didn't find a lot of conflict among feminists at that time.
No, very striking, very striking. I mean, but my initial impulse was to read the literature because that's how I had begun with Rising Sun, another business story. And in U.S.-Japan relations, there's tremendous open conflict, vigorously expressed. And so I was accustomed to that. And when I started to read feminist writing, I found it at first oddly bland, you know, because there didn't seem to be this conflict at all, apparently. And it took me a long time to realize that reading a certain woman, that she was actually disagreeing with another kind of trend of thought, but it was very subtly expressed and very much in line with the notion that we are cooperative and we're not going to openly attack one another. And it makes actually tedious reading, and it's of course not true. Feminism is seriously and deeply divided. There are many people who speak of the feminisms. You know, there are camps that absolutely disagree. So my initial experience was to read this literature that was not surprisingly uncontentious. And then when I went to look at corporations and talk to people who worked in high-tech companies of the sort that I was going to write about, the first thing that I discovered was that none of this literature was known. None of the major figures were known. No one knew who Catherine McKinnon was.
Right.
She's a major figure.
Sure. University of Michigan wrote a new book on.
Yeah. No one knew who she was. And as soon as they heard the word professor, they turned away. Yeah. Not interested in anything academic. And I was absolutely stopped in my tracks. Yeah. Because I thought, well, here's all this set of ideas, but it turns out in the workplace, no one knows it, no one cares about it, and on the contrary, there's a kind of rough and ready, very fast-paced way of addressing harassment, and it's very much different, very much more pragmatic and different from the sort of ideological way the discussions are carried out.
Where do you think it's going? I mean, do you think in the workplace in 10 years we'll have a sort of sex-free zone? That somehow this will work itself out and so that people understand the rules and understand what's proper? Because right now what you have is everybody agrees on the extremes. On one, everybody agrees that certain things are blatant.
Yes. And
on the other hand, there are certain things that people agree that's not, clearly not, but there's a gray area in there. And that's
right.
what scares everybody else, produces the paranoia. How will we work that out?
I think we'll work it out in the way that historically societies have always done that, which is that in human relationships where there is anxiety or tension, and there is always inherently anxiety and tension in superior-inferior relationships and hierarchies. You know, when you meet the king, you're nervous.
Yes.
And the king may be nervous for his own reasons.
It reminds me of a story I'll tell you quickly, is that I've heard 1,000 times about people who say, I'm going to go in there and tell the president what's on my mind. I'm going to tell him how he's screwing up as president. And then aides will say, the guy walks in there, he may be a captain of industry and he may have a, $150 billion company. He walks in there and, yes, Mr. President, right. You're doing a very nice job. Right. Count me on your team.
Right.
At the Oval Office and all of that sort of, does it.
Very tough to maintain that. And I think there's a similar kind of anxiety between the sexes. You know, whenever there's the possibility that I'm attracted to you, we might have a sexual relationship, this might have whatever, then that's tension. I mean, sex is tension. So what the society ordinarily does, what human beings have historically done, is stereotype behavior in order to reduce anxiety. We shake hands, we touch one another in this special way, and if you don't shake hands, you will immediately raise the anxiety not only of the person whose hand you won't shake, but everyone else who's present. You know, you break that convention and there's tension. We say, how are you? And we do not want to know. You know, I mean, whenever you say, hi, how are you, and somebody starts to tell you, you think, oh no, I didn't want to know how you are. I'm saying I acknowledge you in the physical space. Stereotype. So I think that in the last 30 years, that the stereotypical behavior between men and women, the social role playing, opening the doors, helping with the coats, all that business, was broken by women for very good reasons. They were saying, we're changing the power structure. We want a new deal. Don't open the door for me. Don't help me with my coat. Don't patronize me. And by the way, don't call me Miss or Mrs. My name is Ms. Right. And that's wise. That's sensible. That got a lot of attention. It woke the men up. It was great. But we cannot continue to have this lack of definition. I mean, it's too uncomfortable for everyone. And I think that we will settle into new forms and styles where everyone is comfortable. For example, it's really necessary in the workplace for people who work together and who know each other to make a personal comment or a comment about appearance.
Right.
We have to. I mean, we see each other and we think, gosh, you look tired, or is everything okay, or that's a nice
I love your
clothing.
hair. You obviously
Yeah.
got my hair. I love it. It's terrific.
Yeah, I mean, that's a natural human thing. We need to be able to do that. And we need to know what's going to be offensive. We have to decide. What can I say where you really can't take it as offensive, and where am I overstepping? That's not clear now, and it needs to be.
A couple of things I want to. Here's what I think you're a little. This is the rising sun metaphor. You're worried that they're going to think that you're anti-feminist. They're worried that you're worried that they're going to think you're sexist and that you have some message that you are reactionary, which is sort of what they said after Rising Sun. That's what worries you.
Right-wing paranoid.
Yeah. you're right-wingophobic. Right? That's what you're worried about.
I don't know that. No, I think that when you tell a story like this, the interest in the story, in this particular story for me, was that it seemed to me that whatever attitude you take, whatever point of view you have coming in, this story will disturb you. I hope it will.
And make you ask hard questions.
Yes. Say, wait a minute, how about this? And I think particularly in gender relations, you know, I'm surprised because, you know, when I was talking about U.S.-Japan relations, not everyone is interested or very knowledgeable about that. Many people say I'm not knowledgeable either, but at least that has its arcane aspects. Yeah. But we are all sexual creatures. I mean, we've all... Yeah.
This is something everybody can touch and know as part of their own experience. Everybody has this as part of their experience.
And I'm always surprised. We must surely know how complicated it is and how ambiguous and how we all kind of sometimes get into a situation that we wish we weren't in, or maybe try and backpedal or do it well or badly. We all have to turn things down.
I want to move on, but let me just stay with, because you've got a whole long life we want to talk about, but what's been the reaction to it? I mean, what kind of reaction, what kind of mail, what kind of feedback are you getting from people? What are they saying to you, author?
It's interesting. What's most interesting to me is that a tremendous number of people just say, good book, I liked it, particularly working women. Enjoyed it.
Working women?
Yeah.
Yeah. Opened my eyes as to how people might feel in a different...
I don't even think that... I think that they just look at it and say, I know a woman like that. Yeah. I know a corporate attorney like that. I know, you know, they just see that and read it and enjoy it.
Film. It's already been sold. 3.5 million is the figure we've been bandied about to Warner Brothers, I think. You were going to produce this one, so you were so unhappy with Rising Sun that you not only going to write the screenplay here, you're going to produce this sucker, right?
Yes.
You've already had a conflict with the original director, Milo Forman.
Yes. Well, we had...
Are these painful questions, Michael?
No,
Am I asking
really
terrible questions?
I think that actually Milos and I had a really interesting time together, and we kind of agreed to disagree. I mean,
because you saw what differently?
Everything. Really.
Everything.
Yeah, I think. We really saw what this story ought to be differently.
Yeah. What are you going to do? I mean, how do you, is it going to be different as a film than it is as a book? Do you have characters in mind already? Did you have, in fact, as you wrote this book, I mean, John Grisham now acknowledges, a different writer, fiction writer, acknowledges that he thought about Julia Roberts when he was writing Pelican Brief. You know, did you have any kind of...
No, I don't. And in fact, when I wrote Rising Sun, I thought about Sean Connery.
Yeah, because he's your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's very unusual for me. And particularly with this, because it was based on a real story with real people, I was primarily imagining those people.
Yeah. What are the mistakes that was made with Rising Sun that you don't want to see happen with Disclosure?
I don't know how to say. There's a way in which I think a book can be changed in many different... I really feel that film is a different medium from you know, they have different values, different things work well. So, I mean, major changes can occur. I really look to see if the movie works well in its own terms. And from my point of view, the greatest disappointment about Rising Sun is not so much any modification of content, although that occurred. It's that what really should have been a bang-up police thriller wasn't very thrilling as far as I was concerned.
It wasn't.
Didn't work very well as a movie.
Yeah. And you and Kaufman had some conflict over that, did you not?
Well, actually, I had a sort of working difficulty with Phil and left the project very early, only a few weeks in. So there wasn't actually content matters.
Why not direct it yourself? Disclosure.
Well, each time, that comes up, Charlie, and particularly with Disclosure, I thought maybe I should direct it. And there's another book. I want to write another book.
What's the next book?
Well, I can't say.
Oh, come on. I mean, because you don't want to give it away, you don't want people, or because it's, I mean, I respect that, but what is the reason people don't want to talk about it? Is it a jinx? Is it because you don't want other people going out writing your idea? Is it because...
it's none of those things. It's that there's something about the energy of it being retained.
If you only know about it, you will maintain its own energy.
Well, when I was 20 years ago, somebody came to me and said, "Here's a good story for you to write," and it was, in that rarest of moments, it was a good story for me to write. And I listened to it and I thought, this is a fabulous story. And for the next 2 months, everywhere I went, I said, well, this guy told me this great story, and this is the story. And I told everyone. And then never wrote it.
Yeah, I know. So I got you. So the energy was dissipated in telling the story rather than sitting at the typewriter. But you might direct this project. You might.
Yes, there's always that possibility.
Was it more than 50%?
I don't know. I never know till I get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about Steven Spielberg? Jurassic Park, Disclosure. He's just made a brilliant film, Schindler's List. Maybe he's looking for something different, which is a nice contemporary story.
Well, Steven, of course, saw this as soon as it came out and called me. Was very complimentary about it. I was in Japan doing
They let you in?
Oh, yes. No, I had a wonderful time in Japan. Well, what was fascinating was Steven Spielberg is just revered in Japan. And I was staying at
because of Close Encounters, I guess.
I don't know. What I think it's the whole body of work. But the Japanese respond to him very much. And I had been in the Imperial Hotel for several days, and the word got out that I had received a call from Steven Spielberg. And my status just... I was suddenly a very important person.
Maybe we were wrong about Mr. Crichton. He may be a good guy after all. So why not Spielberg to direct Disclosure?
He doesn't want to do it.
Doesn't want to?
No.
Yeah. Well, who might do it if not Spielberg? Do you have any other choices there?
Well, I think it's just we can't say...
like?
We can't say, I like a lot of directors. We can't say right now, Charlie. I mean, we're in the middle of...
You will write the screenplay?
Yes.
Okay. Back when you were growing up, you always had this yen to write.
I did.
What was it?
I don't really understand it. I think it had to do with seeing my father do it.
Yeah. He was a journalist turned advertising executive.
Right, and he, he used to do some freelancing, so I'd see a person at home typing, and that turned into money, so I had an idea that could happen, and certainly the notion of that you could do writing, and it wasn't strange, that was kind of somebody in the house did it.
It's acceptable, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't...
I never knew anybody that ever did television when I grew up in a small town in the South. It was an alien place to go do television.
I'm sure, yeah.
Still is.
It's okay now.
I keep practicing though. Practicing.
You're doing fine, John. It's good. It's going to be fine.
All right.
I think you're coming across very well. Yes. Yes, you can. In fact, it's your show. You can do whatever you like.
I sometimes wonder. So you had this thing, your parents, and they like books, and parents, I read, they would really, and I just think about this because I think about family today with all the problems we're having, and a lot of people there, everybody across the spectrum of ethnicity and racial background are all acknowledging the centrality of family and something that's sort of been there, but it's more and more as we search for roots.
That's right.
To read about you and your family, they encourage you to believe everything was possible.
Yes.
They took you on trips.
Yes.
I mean, all of this,
Very encouraging.
What did it make you think about nurturing rather than, I mean, you're a kid that did real well academically. What did it make you think about nurturing?
You know, I think now that I'm a parent, of course all that's important, but sometimes I'll be telling a story to my daughter who's 5.
Right.
And I'll be telling a story, and she'll say, "No, Dad, wait a minute. Why should the giant leave the cellar now? Keep him in the cellar, and then Jack can get out." And she's rewriting, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, well, what do you know about it? And
she says genes.
Yes, that's right. Or I wonder, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a storytelling? My father used to tell us stories when putting us to bed, and what's involved in that interest in storytelling? So my daughter used to talk about herself in the third person. She'd say, "Here she goes, hiding in the closet," and I thought, well, what is that?
Right. But when you went to medical school, why medical school for you?
Sometime in my university training, I read a statistic, I don't know where, that only 200 people in America could make a living only writing books.
And Michael Crichton, who sold 100 million copies in the last, I don't know, I guess that's how many copies of your books are out there, didn't believe he had the goods, the right stuff, to be one of those 200.
I have a question for you. Who counted those 100 million? How do we know that?
Where's your take?
Yes, that's right.
And whatever happened to it.
Right.
All right, let's on with the Michael Crichton story. So you went to medical school. And while you were there, you wrote Andromeda Strain, which did pretty well, maybe 500,000 copies or something, you know, maybe more.
Oh, no, books didn't sell anything like that.
100,000. 100,000 copies, you know.
So enormous.
And did that tell you anything? Did it change your life? Did it make you say, no internship for Michael?
Yeah, I had in fact already decided not to go forward by that time. And the reason was really that I discovered that, you know, you didn't know anybody in television. I didn't know a physician, really, except my family physician, and no one in my family was a physician. And I had only sort of fantasies about what it was like to be a doctor. And in school, found that I really wasn't suited for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me.
Did you academically, you did well, though?
I did okay.
You know, I mean, it was a...
Middle of the class.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, you had an aptitude for it, you just didn't have an interest in it.
I'm not sure that I can differentiate aptitude and interest
I'm not sure
anymore.
either. Yeah. So you write Andromeda Strain, and then what happens then? What do? You go out to Los Angeles and say...
Actually, I was at that point I was about 25, and I'd spent all of my life in some academic setting, and now it was over. You know, I was about to be ejected into the world, and I needed a kind of halfway house. So I went to the Salk Institute in La Jolla.
What a great place to put down, you know, on the banks of the Pacific.
That's right, it was great.
You know, Louis Kahn building and everything. You could just be there.
Wonderful building.
Yeah, thinking maybe would you be a medical researcher?
No, Salk had an idea that along with the biomedical people who were primarily staffing the place, that he was going to have writers and artists in residence.
Yeah.
So I sent him a letter and said, well, I'm a writer. Right. And he said, come. So I went. It was great.
Yeah. What did you think of him?
Oh, I think he's wonderful.
I do too. Yeah. You know, I mean, what amazes me about him, even though you can never sure that all of his ideas are going to be proven right, is the passion he has. Even today. I visited with him about 3 or 4 months ago when we were out in San Diego. And it's extraordinary. I mean,
yes.
You know,
a remarkable
kind of.
And a wonderful person for me to know at that time, because I was being hit by a tremendous amount of publicity about this medical student who'd quit medicine and made all this money in the movies and so on. And Salk knew everything there was to know about publicity and fame, and he knew exactly what a lot of baloney it was, and he was a wonderful anchor for me.
You directed, and we're going to see a clip from one of them, The Great Train Robbery. Was that the first direction?
No, that was about, I think it was the third.
That was the third. What was first?
A movie called Westworld.
Yeah. Why did you want to direct?
You know, I don't know quite what, I mean, there are a couple of things. One was the desire to protect material, which is the traditional reason to do it. And
protect, i.e., the artist's vision.
Yes. I was not very happy with the film that was made of The Terminal Man.
Right.
But the other thing is, when they were shooting the Andromeda Strain, I went on the set, and Bob Wise was very good about having young people come on. And I looked at it, and I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. I can do this. And of course, I didn't really know what I was looking at. I didn't know why I said, I can do this. But I don't understand what it is that makes you think, I can do this.
But don't you say that?
I can't do this.
Don't you say that about most things? Tell me something you just know you can't do. I mean, I don't, obviously brain surgery, but something you know you can't do that's reasonable for you to say. I mean, you've written a monograph on Jasper Johns. You know, you are evidently a terrific cook. I mean, there are those of us more mortal people who are enormously jealous of people who have a range of skills.
I think everybody has a range of skills.
And so what's the difference then? You simply are out there willing to
try. But my guess is, you asked what I can't do. My guess is you do not want to hear my opera.
No.
And you do not want to see my ballet.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and probably you don't want to hear my epic poem either.
No.
Well, see.
There you go. But do you dream that you could write the great epic poem?
I do, actually. I just got a cramp in my leg. What does that mean? It's somebody speaking to me.
Yeah, right.
Bad boy.
It means you probably skied too much over the holidays. Now, do you have that epic poem there in your pocket, or?
No, I don't. I don't.
All right. So you start directing. Roll clip. Let's take a look at least one thing that you've done. The Great Train Robbery. Here it is. Tell me about the friendship with Sean Connery. I mean, was this the first time you two worked together, knew each other?
Yes.
Yeah, and you came out of that as pals.
Sean is, I think, an inspiration to many people who know him. You know, he has this wonderful spirit. I don't know how to describe it differently. He's one of the few people in the world that I would say is delightful. He's delightful. Yeah. You know, how can I explain it? Some of the things that you don't see about him, he's a remarkable mimic. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while he'd say, come on, let's go rehearse the next scene. We'd go into the next room while they were setting up, and we'd rehearse and lay out the scene, and Sean would play all the roles, women's roles, men's roles, and he would do the woman very quickly, very efficiently, mimicking Leslie Ann Down. And then he'd be on to the next person, and you'd see these glimpses of things that he would do. It was extraordinary, and he loved to do it. You know, he just had a wonderful time. So I think of him as a complete person. You know, I mean, he has his adult side, and he has his childish side. He has his male and his female side. He has everything.
Do you think you're any good as a director?
I don't ever think I'm any good as anything.
So 950,000 copies later, you're not sure?
No, I see only fault.
Yeah. Now you've had a periods of writer's block, right?
Yes.
You know, and Olivier's had his own periods of where he was fearful of going on stage.
That's right.
How could that happen? What happens? You sit there in front of the typewriter or the computer and it just nothing comes out.
See, here's the problem, Charlie. Since I don't know,
help me understand.
I don't know what happens when it does work.
Yeah. So you don't know what happens
when
it's not working.
All I know is it's not working.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like I have a similar kind of feeling about cars because I'm not mechanical in any way. So all I can say is the car doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and to the extent that
but you can take the car to the service station.
Yes, you can.
Into the garage.
And I took myself to the service station.
That's what I want to talk about. Yeah. That's exactly what I want to know. Because you went off on sort of a whole thing of trying to find out who Michael was, right?
Yes.
And what'd you find out?
I found out that I really didn't have any idea. But that
who
all
you were and what motivated you.
Right. And that most of my ideas were wrong.
About yourself?
Yes.
Like what?
Well, I imagined that I was a person who was kind of physically frail, a kind of a weak person, a person who was easily shaken out of his determination. I was somebody who didn't like to get my hands dirty, literally.
To fight for what you believed in?
Yeah. You know. And in my middle 30s, I climbed Kilimanjaro. Yeah. By a kind of accident. I had no idea what I was in for, or I never would have done
blisters on your feet and everything else.
That's right.
A little physical pain.
Yes, tremendous pain. Bleeding blisters, and because the shoes didn't fit, and because I wasn't in shape. My idea of getting in shape to climb an 18,000-foot mountain was I quit smoking 2 days before. And people would say,
You're not really as bright as I thought you were.
No, they would say, have you ever been at altitude? And I said, oh, sure, I've been in Denver. That's right.
I've been to 8,000 to 9,000 feet, for God's sakes. How big is this mountain?
What's the difference?
Yeah, right.
But when I came down, you know, and at a certain point around 15,000 feet, people were starting to say, is this worth it? Let's stop. And I had absolutely, I was not going to stop. I was going to get to the top. It was going to happen. And coming down, I then realized that I had a lot more strength and a lot more determination than I was acknowledging, and also that I'd really enjoyed this experience.
And what difference did it make in your life that you found this out?
The most important thing was I realized that all these ideas I'd had about myself were wrong. And in that case, what other ideas might be wrong?
Well, stay with me, though. What else did you learn, other than the fact that you were not frail, that you did have this strength? What else did you find out? What other...
I like climbing. I didn't mind being in the cold. I like challenges. Okay. That maybe one of the problems that I'd had was that I was not setting high enough goals for myself. That I was actually quite energized by the thought that I couldn't do something.
What do you find as you grow older about setting goals and expectations? I mean, are you still as driven? Has having a 5-year-old Taylor, your daughter, does that change what you expect of yourself? And
well, it certainly provides other pulls from work, and it certainly redefines in a very strong way for me this notion of a career, which is I think a sort of fantasy. You know,
I can reassure you that you are among the 200 now, Michael. If you need some reassurance, the 200 writers, the only 200 writers who can make a living in America.
You know what I really think, Charlie, is that there's this joke that when on your deathbed nobody ever says, "I wish I spent a few more days in the office."
Paul Tsongas, you know.
I think also that when you get to that point, you realize that the only thing that matters is your experiences and your human relationships. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. Everything else is baloney.
Your experiences and your human relationships.
That's right.
Those people that are part of your family.
Right.
And those people that you care about.
That's right.
And those people that care about you.
Right.
In the end, that's where it's at.
That's it.
Everybody comes to that, and it takes us all a long time to get there.
Yeah.
You know, especially those of us, and you are one, and I'm one, who grew up and have progressed into middle age. We're about the same age. Driven to do things, a whole range of things, and a whole range of curiosities. And no one has ever said, limits, 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 right?
Well, I think at some point I at least start to say, what are we really trying to accomplish? And kids have their way of stopping you. You know, my daughter one day said she didn't want me to go in the office, and I said, well, I had to. And
she said,
then now you're thinking, well, what is so important? And she said, Dad, your publisher must be the luckiest person in the world because he gets to see you every day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Well, how are we spending this time? Hold on.
Hold on. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Taylor, for having me rearrange my priorities real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. The marriage thing. Number 4.
The marriage thing sounds like the vision thing.
Yeah,
right,
the marriage thing. 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4.
Why did it take you 4 to get it right?
I don't know. I'm only grateful it didn't take 5, Charlie.
Well, no, come on. I mean, you know.
What actually happened?
Yeah.
I think there's 2 things at work. One is some aspect of self-awareness, you know, and the other.
Mountain.
Yeah, you know, I really did have a period in my life when I thought that if there was something wrong with the relationship, that it was her.
Her.
Yeah,
because you're perfect, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
What could be wrong?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I know all
what's
about
there not to
myself.
like about Michael?
That's right. I have absolute self-awareness, and I'm a swell guy.
Yeah, you bet. You know, if you want a good time, you've come to the right place.
That's right. That's right. And if there's any problem, it must be yours.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't measure up, kid.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And, you know, and then you found out, not so.
Can't be true.
Yeah.
Can't be
now,
true.
did Anne Marie? I mean, did your 4th wife help you understand that, or did you find that out yourself?
I think by then I was in serious questioning, and And what happened with Anne Marie is I really got to the point where I said, I really want this relationship, and I will do whatever it takes to have it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you have to do.
And
that's an interesting. That's
it is. Oh, I know. I know.
Yeah.
I know. It is the notion that the relationship and fighting for it and making it, keeping it, means something. You know, you can't just say it means something and it's worth.
Right. I think there's something else too, which is that because I grew up in the sort of period of sexual freedom and all that stuff, that it took a long time to decide that actually that was not the valued goal that we all imagined that it was, and that actually a committed relationship that lasted a period of time was more interesting. It was more interesting than continuously changing the...
You bet. I want to take a clip because I want to talk about Jurassic Park. Here's what surprises me about this film, and we're just doing this for... Why didn't you have... I don't want to be crass, but did you just sell them the rights to this and walk away?
Is this a technical question?
From the IRS, no.
Is this are you asking about points? What are you asking
I was asking about points.
No, I didn't just sell it and walk away.
Fine. So we're okay. We don't need to worry.
No, we don't need to worry. No, everything is fine.
Here's a... Yeah, Jurassic Park, roll tape. Here it is.
They do.
You won't just say this now. I mean, when everybody, this thing made 300, it's the biggest grossing film ever, I guess, now, right? And everybody thinks they were underpaid. You think you were underpaid. Stephen thinks he was underpaid. The studio thinks they didn't get enough.
They do. They do. They absolutely feel.
Is this what we mean by greed?
No, I just think it's something about working and having things be successful or not successful, and finally when something has this kind of enormous success, there's some kind of human thing where you immediately think, I didn't get enough.
Yeah. Is there a great mountain that no, I don't mean physically. I realize you've done Kilimanjaro, and you may want to do do you want to do Everest?
No.
You've done that.
No, I haven't, no.
No, you've climbed a mountain.
Yes.
That's my point. You've climbed a mountain. So there are no more mountains on your agenda. Is there any great thing that sits back there in the back of your mind that you are saying to yourself, this is something I've got to have. You've got a million seller here, hardback, we think. What's the unattainable goal so far? What's the mountain you want to climb? You have a wonderful family, you have a happy marriage, you've got a daughter that seems to be smarter than you are.
Mm-hmm. Hope so. It's funny to talk about, but I think at this point in my life,
at the ripe old age of 51 or 52.
That's enough to start to think that, it does not last forever. So I'd like it to continue for a while, and I'd like to continue to be interested in my work, and I can't, I don't think there's any way to say I want to work on the most successful movie in history or to write a book that sells it.
That wouldn't be that. But this is autobiographical travels. This was autobiographical. Hard for you to write or easy for you to write?
Turned out. Easy. Easiest book I ever worked on.
Was it cathartic?
Yes. And also I had great admiration for the subject.
And small ego.
At least I knew him well.
Now here is the question, though. You got all this here. And look, this is fear. My God, this man is prolific, if nothing else. How to think about computers. I mean, do you have this notion that you pick a subject and Michael can write about it in an interesting way and make it interesting to a curious audience?
I think I'm interested in doing that, but what it comes out of, Charlie, is this feeling that ordinarily I go into some area because there's something I want to know. And in this way I feel very lucky in that I'm able to say, well, what about the workplace? I mean, how is it going over there? And I can stop and I can do reading, and then I can get on the plane and go visit the companies and talk to people and form some conclusions, and I do have to write a book then, but I'm able to really explore this, and then when that's done, I can go do something else.
What's the hardest part of the process for you? The writing process.
Oh, that's easy. The hardest part is starting to write.
And how do you know when you're ready to do that? Because you do all this traveling, you talk to all these people, you do all the reading, you do the research. How do you really, when you're ready, and I think an expression you use, you're ready to put butt to chair?
Yes. Well, I have a good answer for that. At the last possible moment when you cannot postpone it anymore, when if you don't start
when your publisher's on the phone saying, Michael, Lynn Nesbitt's on the phone saying, Michael, we have a serious problem here.
Yeah. And you think, well, then you wait another month, and then you start.
And then you start.
Yeah.
But once you start, people say to you that you take leave of your body, that you become so focused, and you sit there, and then you began to get up in the morning at 6.
Yes.
You know, in the second week, you're getting up every morning at 5, and you're always eating the same food. I mean, this is a little strange.
Yes.
And then the next, all of a sudden, you're getting up at 4.
Yes.
And then you're going to bed at 10 and getting up at 2.
Yes.
You're 4 hours of sleep.
That's right.
And then you're really churning on all cylinders.
Yes.
You know. And it takes you about 40 days to do this. Is that right?
Just about.
40 days, a couple of chapters a day, or what? I mean, a couple of pages a day.
No, yeah. The first drafts are short.
Yeah.
And they usually get elaborated later. But yes, it's a kind of I think of it as like a convulsion or a seizure.
Does it bother you that you are considered a popular writer, and some say have not received the literary accolades that you probably think you deserve?
Goes with the territory.
Goes with the territory. If the public buys you in huge numbers, it's hard for the critics to climb aboard.
Traditionally, that's true.
Is that what you believe?
Yes.
You believe you're better than the critics think you are?
Sure, doesn't everybody?
Disclosure by Michael Crichton. It's a pleasure to have you here. Really is.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Wow.
An hour.
You're kidding.
No.